In the past, I was literally busy for every single thing. I was too busy to work out. I was too busy to hang out with my own family. And to be honest, I even got to a point where I felt like I was too busy to even have one single rest day. If you're anything like me and your calendar is stressing you out more than helping, I think it's time for a change. Hey guys, if you're new to this channel, my name is Coach Royce. I've been a trainer for 15 plus years. I've been a gym owner for nearly a decade. I'm a father, I'm a husband, and believe me, when life hits, life hits. Now, over those years, I've had phases in my life where I didn't have a calendar. I had phases of my life where I had a kind of a calendar, and now I'm into a point of my life where I have a calendar that not only allows me to be present, it allows me to be more productive, and it also overall just allows me to be less stressed. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how I manage my calendar as a coach, as an entrepreneur, and as a family man. Now, with that said, grab yourself a piece of paper, grab yourself a pen, grab yourself some coffee, and let's get right into it. All right, step one is we are going to set up color code categories. For this particular example, there are going to be 4 categories here, but in your life, it could be a multitude of category colors. But for this particular example, we're going to use 4. And here are my 4 that I use in my calendar. The first one is cup fillers. This is stuff that is going to be things that energize me throughout the day. So I'm going to color that green. The next color is going to be the work stuff. This is just my 9-to-5 work. I'm going to label that blue or color that blue. The next one is going to be deep work. This is going to be some stuff that requires a lot of energy for my brain, and I'm going to color that red. And then the last one, I'm going to color it black, but for intensive purposes, it's supposed to be gold, but it's golden hours. I don't have a gold marker, so we're going to color that thing black. Once you have these color code categories down and labeled, now you just want to set it off to the side and we can now start building your calendar. Now, this particular step is super important because in the past, I didn't have color codes for myself, and I would just look at my calendar and I would just think it's all work and no play. And it became very draining. It became very overwhelming. In fact, I didn't even want to look at the calendar. The whole point of a calendar is to look at it. So by implementing colors into the whole scheme of things, it actually started to energize me. So having these color codes also allows you to zoom 30,000 feet view and be able to see where you're spending your time and where you're spending your energy. Step 2 is we want to just observe and see your calendar. We're going to see your calendar one, and then we're eventually going to create a dream calendar on a separate tab, because at the moment you might not have the opportunity to create your dream calendar. That dream calendar is going to be something that we are going to build throughout this process. It might take you a week, it might take you a month, it might take you a whole year to build out what that dream calendar is going to look like. But before we build out that dream calendar, it's important to see your calendar for where it's at. If you're looking at your calendar, you're going to be in one of 2 camps, especially if you typed in, how do I build a calendar? And you somehow found this particular episode. You're either going to be in the family of there's just no calendaring happening. It's just completely blank, which is great. All you really got to do here is just look at your day-to-day and start plugging in those little spots of where you're doing particular things like work, play, focus work. You can just build it as we go. However, if you are already potentially productive, you're more likely going to be in this version 2 category where you just have all of your work stuff. And that's kind of where I started, especially when I started to understand how to build a really stress-free calendar and an energizing calendar. The next thing you want to do after looking at your calendar is to ask yourself, how does it make you feel? And again, we go deep on the feeling stuff because it's so important. Emotions drive us to do a lot of things, and it drives us to show up in life in ways we're either productive or procrastinating or more peaceful. So it's important to understand how your emotions are tied into looking at your calendar. For example, to be transparent, when I looked at my calendar in the past, I would just feel overwhelmed and I would feel like I didn't want to do that. Through that type of motion, I would just never look at my calendar and I would just panic throughout the week. It never energized me. But when I started building my dream calendar, I now look forward to looking at what I'm doing because now I know what I'm going to focus on. Now I know where my work is, and I also know where my play is. It really separates those 2 things for me. I get more present in the work because I know there's work, and I get more present in the play because I know when there's play or recovery or family time, whatever that may be. All right, step number 3 is start with pit stops. And you can call this a ton of different words. You can call it self-care time, you can call it rest time, you can call it fun time. But I like to think of it as pit stops because I like to think of life as a journey. And life has a journey and destinations. And in every destination, you need to refuel so you can get further. Because if you don't refuel, you're not gonna get that far and you're gonna burn out. And that often happens to me when I don't design my pit stops. So what is included in these pit stops? Things like morning routines, things like night routines, things like lunches, family time, my workout time, my breaks, my self-development time. Things that energize me, I'm gonna go ahead and color those green and I'm gonna block those out first. Because if you're anything like me, you normally plan out all of the work stuff, all of your clients, all of your appointments, all of your admin work. You start to block that out. Those are reminders for you to work, not reminders for you to rest. And because I've done this particular strategy in the past, I would be left burnt to a crisp by the time it was like Wednesday because I wasn't recovering at all. I just put more tasks, no recovery. And you extrapolate that over 5 years, 10 years, my stress was through the roof. And I started to gain a little bit of weight and a little bit more weight here and there. I started to manifest injuries until I started doing this. All right, step number 4 is schedule deep work. Now, guys, this particular step has been a massive game changer in my life. In fact, it moved the needle for me financially and my family and also in my health. Now, what are needle movers? Needle movers are gonna be tasks that require a lot of energy, a lot of creative energy, a lot of focus. Oftentimes, when I used to create things, I would only block out an hour. The problem with that was it takes me about 20 to 30 minutes to get into this flow state, to get into this like moment of being present. And then I would start thinking of my next appointment coming up. I would start thinking of my client and how I needed to prepare and things that I need to remember about them. And what ends up happening is you're actually only doing 10 minutes of creative work, which doesn't move the needle at all. And what ends up happening is you become frustrated and then that starts to stack week after week. And then bam, you're stressed and you feel like a piece of crap because you didn't get anything done meaningful. When you're creating this deep work block sessions, it's important that you either block it out for 2 hours or no more than 4 hours. Here's the reason why. 1 hour, like I said, is too short. 4 hours is way too long because I've done more than 4 hours before and I just find myself procrastinating and the work is just not as good. It's just not as focused. And any time I start to work more than 2 hours, my work actually just gets sloppy. So I really block that time. Feel free to experiment what your focus blocks are gonna look like, but I recommend it should be in between 2 to 4 hours. Now, throughout the week, you can do them every single day to block out creative hours. However, I recommend starting small. Like you have a 9-to-5 job. I don't think it'd be the best idea to put 4 hours in Monday, 4 hours in Tuesday, 2 hours on Wednesday. I find it to be extremely exhausting doing that. Getting into deep work requires a lot of energy, like I said, and it'll require a lot of self-care. For me, my sweet spot is I'm committed to do 2 major deep work blocks throughout the week. And if I feel good and I can place something in there where I feel like I can get into some deep modes, I'll plug it in. I typically just block out 2 days where I have really major focus work and I just start out like that. And then I'll reflect on it, see if it actually was productive and I got things done. All right, step number 5 is now you can add your 9-to-5 work. And for this example, your 9-to-5 work might not look as clean as this, but over the course, as you do this more and more often, you're gonna start to notice that you can structure it in a way where it's very repetitive and very in rhythm. It's not all over the place. At the start, it might look all over the place. You're gonna have some blues at Monday, some blues on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and even Sundays you might have blues. But over the course, as you continue to practice this particular calendaring system / method, you're gonna start to notice that you're blocking things in a way that just fits your life. The 9-to-5 work for me can be like coaching, it's personal training, it's meetings, it's admin work. For you, it can be a lot different depending on what job you do. But for the most part, label that blue and start plugging it in inside that self-care, inside that deep work. When I first started to implement this, to be honest, I was kind of panicking a little bit. I thought I was going to lose all my clients. I thought all of my employees would hate me. I thought my family would hate me. And ironically, it was kind of the opposite. One of the things that I started to notice that my clients started to shift into those blocks, because those were the only blocks that I had. And some of them I just didn't even tell them. And I was kind of embarrassed at first, but eventually I started to get into a space where I'm like, oh, those are my workout times. That's my family time. That's my lunch time. That's my blog time. That's my podcast time. And they start to respect it. And they respect it in a way because they start to realize maybe I should be blocking time for myself as well. Because at the end of the day, especially if you're a coach and you want them to be less stressed, more healthier, they need to start prioritizing themselves. If you're not prioritizing you and your health and your well-being, they're going to receive that too. But if you start to do that for yourself, they're going to start valuing their time a little bit differently. They start to structure their time a little bit differently. They start blocking out their training times, their self-care times, their rest times, their lunch times different. That's happening from a client perspective, but it's also happening from a family perspective and also from a team perspective of mine, because they start to see that I actually manage my time, manage my energy at such a high level. So I no longer became embarrassed. I just kind of show them. A lot of times they're just like, whoa, you're so crazy. And to be honest, it's actually, I'm less crazy because I have the actual calendar in my mind. I'm more crazy without it. My first journey in doing this, and one of the coaches that I had, one of the first life coaches I ever hired, challenged me to just take one day off. So completely green out one day. And I did the Sunday, which was one of the easier days to do it. And we would come back on Monday and have our session, be like, how was that? Did the world fall apart? And I was like, no, actually it wasn't. And in fact, I actually feel pretty good. I feel recharged. He was like, amazing. Now let's go do 2 days. Let's block out 2 days. So I closed out Sunday, and I did Sunday, and we went back on Monday, and he asked me the same question. Did the business burn? Did your life burn? And I was like, no, not at all. In fact, I felt like I got more stuff done because I knew I had to get all my Saturday work done in like Friday. So I started to become a little bit more efficient. I started to become more systemized. And then the next week he was like, all right, I challenge you to take one more half day throughout the week. And I was like, no way, I don't think that's possible. And I did it. And again, I started to take my Friday work and I condensed it in that 8-hour window or that 6-hour window. And I even started doing some pre-work the day before. So I got even more and more sophisticated and systemized. And I thought he'd be happy for me. And I was like, dude, I'm actually now working 5 days, extremely productive in those time frames. What's next? And he was like, oh, you need to take one day off now. And I was like, what do you mean? People are gonna think I'm lazy. And there's all these limiting beliefs that happen when you start to block these times out. And what you find is you actually become less lazy, you become extremely productive, because now all of those wasted time, all of those wasted systems become refined. And I got to a place where I was working 7 days to 6 days to 5 days to 4 days. And I'm like, what else can I do in that spare time? I have 3 days to really do nothing. And this is when this stuff started to happen. I was like, maybe I can create. I started to consume. I started to learn things. I started to listen to podcasts for the first time, how-to videos for the first time. And I was like, maybe I should be able to do that. I would like to do that. And that unlocks this level of creativity. And that level of creativity was not only feeding like my inner spiritual side of me, but it also started to help my business. It also started to help my coaches because now they're watching some of the content that I'm creating. So one of the big epiphanies when I started to calendar was I was really, really sloppy throughout my years. Meaning I was freestyling a lot of things. You think you're good by saying that you're busy all the time, but really what you're affirming is you're just a sloppy worker. So that was one of the things that he told me. Isn't it amazing that you thought you were really, really busy, but you were just really sloppy at your work? All right, step 6 is add some buffer times. Now, throughout this process, as you continue to do this more and more and more, you're gonna find that some of these day-to-day tasks require a lot of energy that's not deep work. An example can be like for me, it was like every time I do payroll or financials or I had some type of admin work that I got to do, I realized that it took a ton of my energy. It just wasn't something that I truly love to do. Another thing can be sometimes you might have clients or classes that you're doing that are extremely draining to your soul. So you want to highlight those things and notice those things about it. And you want to start to apply something that I call buffer times. I put little blocks so I can re-energize. If I have a client that is extremely draining, the next session, I'm gonna put a green little dot there and be like, I'm gonna work out that time, or I'm gonna listen to a podcast, or I'm gonna listen to this YouTube channel. All right, the next thing, this is like extra credit stuff, but if you're deep into this, I might as well show you guys how I operate and how I'm able to stay partly sane, trying to balance all of these hats. Is I have something called weekly reoccurring tasks. And what these are they're just things that I do regularly every single day. And for the most part, in my calendar, there's a tab up top on the Google Calendar that I use, is I just write 3 things that I do on Monday, 3 things that I do on Tuesday, 3 things that I do on Wednesday. And I try to limit it to 3, but sometimes it can get up to 6. But if you're doing this for the first time, I recommend maybe just starting at 3. And some of those things are examples for me because I am a trainer, I am a coach, is one of them is programming. Every Friday I program for my clients. And then another example can be I look at the financials. I try to do this every Tuesday and Thursday. It's something that I'm trying to get good at. I'm trying to become aware of where my money's going and where my money is coming from, and I like to understand that. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, I put a reminder to look at my financials. Another one can be just responding to emails. I hate responding to emails. I feel like you don't need to respond to every single email every single day. So I created Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm gonna go a deep dive into my emails and really look over and really respond to it thoroughly. Now, these tasks are not actually in my calendar because a lot of times it doesn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes. Now, if it does take a whole hour, I recommend blocking that out in that hour and maybe make that part reoccurring. But if it's short, like answering emails or looking at your financials quickly or building out a program, it might not take as long. Now, creating these checklists has been such an integral part of my calendaring system because it allows me to free up some space in my brain. A lot of times I freestyled my day just trying to remember all of those things that I do on a weekly basis. And what ends up happening is I would forget 1 or 2 things, which would make me feel miserable. Like I forgot to program, now I'm panicking. I need to go program for this next client. I forgot to pay the bills here. And it's just becomes super, super stressful. Do yourself a favor and just plug in some of those weekly things so you avoid some of those heartaches. Now, I noticed when I started to do these weekly reoccurring tasks, I noticed my brain to become a little bit more productive, a little bit more creative throughout this process. Because in the past, I would actually just keep it all in my brain. There was some weeks where I hit all the check marks in my brain, but there was a lot of weeks where I forgot 1 or 2 things. I forgot to program, I forgot to look at my financials, I forgot to call my mom, I forgot to respond to emails. And what ends up happening is I would get more stressed out, and they would just start to compile, and I would just make bad decision after bad decision. Instead of trying to remember it in my brain, I just put it in my calendar as reoccurring so I never actually miss it. And that's just one of the side benefits. The major benefit here, guys, is I started to unlock a level of peace and clarity and creativity when I just freed my brain to just have more space. That stuff that's happening on a weekly basis doesn't necessarily need to sit in your brain. There's some other cool things that your brain can do, like process big, deep work problems that you will need, especially if you're trying to progress in your day-to-day life. Step number 8 is Monday hour 1. This is one of the 2 hours that we call the golden hours. We call it golden because it's extremely important. It's extremely impactful because if you do it on a regular basis, you can start to refine your calendar in a way where it starts to get closer to your dream calendar. This concept is not something that I created. It's borrowed from Brooke Castillo, amazing life coach. She built this whole Monday hour 1 system. It's a lot more complex than I'm about to teach you right now, but I've used a lot of her work framework and I've implemented into mine, and it's allowed me to, again, to be more productive, be more at peace, and also feel less stressed. One thing that I do on my Monday hour one now is I ask myself these 3 questions. I ask myself, what are my focus blocks? What might I need inside that focus block, or even just throughout the week in general? And is there anything that I can prepare ahead of time for this particular week so it's more joyful, more fun, more peaceful? And another one that I also include a lot of times is, what project do I need to get done that I didn't finish last week? So I'll include that and I'll push it into this focus blocks so I can get that particular project done. Now, it's important when you block out this hour that you have no distractions. A lot of times when I do my Monday hour one, I'm in my office, I have my headphones on, and I'm just looking at my calendar. And I'm just looking at it ahead of time. If I need to change anything, if I need to add anything, if I need to prepare for anything, I'm doing that ahead of time. A lot of times it'll take me less than an hour, but there are some cases where it takes me a whole hour to do it, because you want to make sure you're in a clear space, a peaceful space to be able to do that. All right, step 9, guys, is Friday hour done. And if your end of week is on a Friday, I recommend putting your last hour of that Friday to be your golden hour. However, if your last day or end of week is on a Saturday, I recommend putting your hour block at the end of Saturday. And then once you block that time out, you want to ask yourself these 3 questions. What was the best part? What was the worst part? How can next week be better? Now, why is that so important? Number 1, if you know the best part of your week, is it possible that you can duplicate that? Or you can do more of that? Because at the end of this whole calendaring thing, we want to feel not only less stressed, we want to feel energized. Imagine going into a week where the only things that you're doing only energize you. Like, what would the possibilities be? Who would I become? Who would I attract being that level of energy? It's amazing when you start to do more of the things that you just love to do. The next thing is, what was the worst part? When you start to identify that some tasks require a lot of energy, 1, we can add those buffer times, but 2, we can either just delegate it to someone that loves that tasks, or we can just start to diminish it over time so it's not killing our stress. When we're just constantly drained every single week and we're not doing anything about it, it starts to bleed into other areas of your life. You start to not make the greatest decisions in your health. You start to taking out on your employees or your loved ones or your coworkers. Life is just not great, and I've been in that situation a multitude of times when I didn't do that. The last question is, how can next week be better? For me currently, the 2 questions that I ask in this particular umbrella is, how can it be 1% less friction and 1% more fun? And when I add that little question and framework around the next week, my week gets easier, because there's a lot of stuff that I can do in my day-to-day, in my week-to-week, that can be a little bit easier. I can add a system to it. I can remove certain processes so we can get things done faster. Whatever that thing is that you're doing throughout the week, you can make it 1% better. You can make it 1% more joyful. You can make it 1% less friction. And you do this over the course of a week and a month and a year, you're gonna find a calendar that is not stressing you out. In fact, it's serving you. And that's the whole idea of this. I know this was a pen and paper sesh, but if you want me to build out another part 2 episode where I'm actually doing this via Google Calendar, I can show you guys that, especially if you're deep into this. Comment below, make a part 2 on how to do this on Google Calendar, and I can do that. And I'll put some effort into that. All right, if you guys like this episode, I'm gonna do another episode on how to fill your cup. It's the little green things on your calendar. There is a way where you can customize it for you, and there is a framework that I use to build that, because everyone's little green blocks are going to be different. If you're interested in finding out what your green blocks are like and what your cup fillers are like, click on this link above here somewhere, and we are going to start building that out on the next episode. See you guys soon. Peace.